Welcome to Dad Bod History. I'm Eric. We've got Jake and Cameron. Nick might show up. We'll see. Jake's waving too. So welcome. We're going to continue with this from pandemic to progress theme, the series. And but before we do that, do we have a message from like Bliller Light or Bluers beer?
Well, you don't have to do it if it's Pabst. That's cheap enough where you can just say Pabst.
I didn't say Pabst.
You don't have to say the name. No, before. Well, yes, I do want to talk about that. But did you watch Middleditch and
Oh my gosh!
Schwartz?
So that night, I
did you watched it?
I got into bed and I put on my phone and I'm just like giggling and it's just like shaking the bed and I don't think my wife was too thrilled with that.
Yeah.
You know, the next day she's like, "What
Short
were you
Paul,
watching?"
baby.
I'm like,
Short
"Oh,
Paul.
oh my god." Well, yeah, I was texting you as I'm watching. I'm like, "This is killing it." Yeah, it was pretty good. I thoroughly enjoyed. I think I watched the first 2 episodes. I might be into the third. So they were going on tour. They were touring with that, and then they had to shut it down. So I think they had like 8 episodes lined up, and the last 5 got postponed.
Thanks, COVID.
So, yeah, jerk. My son
Well, I hope
talks
they
about
pick it up again when they
how
can.
much he
'Cause
wants to punch coronavirus in the face. That's what he says.
Well,
I want to punch coronavirus
I think
in the
that's
face.
the villain of our time.
Like, all right. I mean, that's our
Good for
Hitler.
you.
Well, one of our
Corona.
dozens of Hitlers right now.
We've got a few.
Apparently.
Maybe like Idi Amin at best. Hey, Cameron, did you... First of all, you got to watch Middleditch and Schwartz.
Well,
I have a
Yeah,
recommendation.
I've got enough. I've got enough things that my wife makes fun of me for as it is. So me giggling, you know.
Jake watches
to
Korean
myself.
dramas,
I mean, yeah.
doesn't he?
Yeah. I mean, I can't...
So
Mystic? Okay. So...
Don't make fun of me for
Here's
it.
what happens. Bree's watching it,
Uh-huh.
and I'll be like...
That's why I got into a
and she'll be
discovery
like,
of
what do you want
witches
to watch?
and Twilight.
So there's this one called Mystic, to all the K-pop fans in our audience, of which there's many, I'm sure. Mystic Pop-Up Bar. That's a good one. Check it out. So that's all I'm going to say. But anyway, when you get a chance, Cameron, go shame watch Middleditch and Schwartz in your car when nobody, like in your garage, nobody can see you. So
I'll make sure
so
she
good.
doesn't know.
Exactly.
Oh, it killed.
Hey, speaking of...
No, I got
Cameron-
a recommendation.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's not for you, Jake. Sorry. And it's not because you take recommendations and just toss them out the window.
Is it
which you
because
do.
I'm not Lutheran? Is that why?
You should read this. I'm not going to now.
Yeah, just
I'm never going to read that book.
So
I was just
Cameron,
about to
it's-
buy the book, and then you said...
It's not a book. I wouldn't. No, Cameron's not going to read the books I read. Well, no, he will. Okay, it's a
Hey,
podcast. It's
I
only
can-
on Spotify. An oral
Okay.
history of The Office, hosted by
Really?
Brian Baumgartner. Kevin.
Is that it? Oh no!
Oh.
So it just got
Oh.
released a few days ago, and it's like 3 episodes in out of 12, and it's just retelling like the whole story of The Office. And I'm listening to 3 episodes so far. It's fascinating.
And that guy's
And did you-
voice is totally a must listen.
Oh, his
Yeah, that's-
actual
that's like-
voice,
That's like Velvet.
and he's actually a ball player. He can play basketball.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
You know
so,
what? I
yeah,
remember the basketball episode, and at the end, they
He's just
show him
shooting,
making
yeah.
like 12 or 13 jumpers in a row, like
Yeah.
from 18 feet.
that was the thing. He was a great basketball. He was a good basketball player. He might have played in college or something as well. Not unlike yourself.
Did you notice that a lot... Well, there's another podcast, Fake Doctors, Real Friends, which is Zach Braff and Donald Faison from Scrubs. They've got a podcast. Oh, so apparently that's the thing. If you had a successful show, now you can podcast about it.
Huh.
Well, we're
We're just doing it
this
backwards.
Yeah. What the hell were we thinking? Oh, my God.
And these guys need to plug us now. So you're welcome, all these other podcasts.
Yeah.
return the favor.
Plug us back, Brian.
He definitely will,
Mhm.
and he'll make us a pot of chili as well.
Sounds good.
That's right.
Right off the
Spilled it
carpet.
all over the floor.
Hey, Big Country, did you get your AC
I
fixed?
sure did.
Yeah.
That home warranty is really paying off right about
Is
now. It's like $40 a month, and they've shelled out a lot of money lately.
So it broke again when we were filming actually the first episode
Yeah.
of Pandemic to Progress, and you were worried you're gonna have to replace it. Is that what happened?
Right. Well, I'm actually not worried that I get to replace it because
Hoping to
I think
replace it.
two or three more trips, they're going to be like,
They're
yeah,
gonna replace
okay,
it,
you
yeah.
need a new one. So, knock on wood.
Well, that's good. I'm glad it got taken care of. So,
Yeah. So if you notice the extra sweat from last episode, that's why. My wife texted me midway through and said, "Hey, you feel how hot it is?"
I was able to go
Yeah.
frame by frame and edit that out.
Good.
It took me 20 hours of work, but I
It was
couldn't
worth
sync Jake's audio, but I got the sweat off your brow.
That's what's important.
Really is.
no, it is definitely.
You look good, you play
Um,
good, man.
That's been your motto as long as I've known you.
It's true.
So, and if you don't look good, digitally edit until you do look good is what Eric's motto is.
Just fix it in post.
Fix it in post. So, all right, I guess that's enough. We won't talk about your pretentious beer today, Eric. We'll talk about that on another episode.
No, it's fine.
Um,
So I picked it up at the local. It's not even. It's like a gourmet gas station. I'll call it that we have here, and it's from Highwater
I'm
Brewing.
sorry, what? No.
Yeah.
A gourmet gas station?
So
You want to
if one of you would just
like
visit me,
Is there a guy in the
Well, if-
bathroom that
just-
gives you a spritz of cologne?
I've never been in the bathroom there, so I can't. I
gives you
can't
a
speak
breath
to that.
mint?
Listen, you just need to come visit me, and I'll take you. There's actually 2 of these gas stations within 5 minutes of me. They've got walk-in
Soda
beer,
Fountas, Courvoisier.
walk-in beer fridges, like the big walk-in,
Uh-huh.
and they sell a lot of wine. It's very nice on the inside. They usually have like bakery items. I mean,
Listen to you hyping this gourmet gas station.
Do
listen.
they each week they have a Finer Things Club meeting as well?
I haven't been invited to those yet.
Gourmet gas station.
Yeah. Anyways,
Okay, so what beer
Highwater
did you get
Brewing
at the gourmet gas station?
Campfire Stout. Now, the one I had with dinner was like pull away orange. You know those chocolate oranges that you can get? You ever had those?
No, my gas station isn't that nice.
No.
No, this isn't from the gas station. The chocolate oranges that you can get around Christmas time, maybe, and they peel away into little orange wedges, and it's like orange chocolate, and it's a beer
Okay,
that's
now
flavored
I
like that.
gotcha. I gotcha.
It was really good. I'm just saying.
California's changed you, man. That's all I'm saying.
Can I hold on? Let me get a wine. I want to interest. Hopefully, you can show some interest in this wine. It's a 2013. I don't know anything about wine. Keep it under $8. That's all I say.
$8 wine. Get that box wine at Franzia. All right. Well, I guess I have to visit you now.
I told you. What you waiting for?
Yeah, no, you're right. That was my bad. I chose not to, and little did I know what I was missing out on. So, Cameron, we'll have to make a trip out there
For sure.
Yes.
in the near future.
Bring your equipment. We'll record
Awesome.
in the same room finally.
Oh my God, that would be so fun.
I don't know how we'd set that up, but it'd be fun.
I mean, we'd still Zoom it, right? We'd still all be looking on separate screens, but we'd all be right next to each other.
It'd just be echo everywhere. Yeah, that sounds epic.
And then your son would run behind us, and you'd see him pop, pop, pop out from one screen to the next
Okay, that would be cool.
to destroy the illusion.
That'd actually be pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, when the pandemic ends, that's what we'll have to do. Is come visit
Funny you should bring that up.
So
We're going to talk about the pandemic today, right?
we are gonna, yeah. Let's get into that. So what we're talking about today is Well, I guess what we talked about the first episode was the historical context
We didn't do a very
of
good job,
pandemics and specific.
honestly, of keeping it in
No,
context.
we did a terrible job.
But that's okay.
Yeah, we went off on politics and other stuff, which was definitely fun to talk about. But we were kind of highlighting the historical context of the Black Death or the bubonic plague and the epidemic or influenza of 1918, also known as the Spanish flu. And while we didn't get into a lot of like and it's a shame we didn't, because I think the personal details and the human stories that I found, especially when researching the bubonic plague, it was really captivating. Hearing about how all these people that were living like in Florence and Venice, and they were writing these stories, and they were saying how people were just falling over dead, and fathers were losing sons, and mothers losing daughters, and it just gave you this human element. And I think that's something we forget with history in general, is when we look at, and especially the farther back you go, is we look at a thing like the Black Plague, or you look at something like the Crusades or the Persian Wars, the Peloponnesian Wars, and you say, oh, well, this many people died and these battles were fought here and this is who won, and here's some consequences of that. But you don't really get into the human side of it. Sometimes it gets lost in kind of in the math, if that makes sense, or in the facts, like the cold hard facts, kind of, that's what we focus on. It was interesting for me to read, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but one of these quotes from Agnolo de Tura, and he said, "It's impossible for the human tongue to recount the awful truth. Indeed, one who did not see such horribleness can be called blessed. The victims died almost immediately. They would swell beneath the armpits, and then they would fall over while talking. Father, abandoned child, wife, husband, brother, one brother, another. For this illness seemed to strike through breath and sight. And so they died. None could be found to bury the dead for money or for friendship." Like, it paints this picture of devastation. And I think that's something that, even though we were talking about it last week, like up to 60% of the people in Europe died from this, we were looking at it like as just a number. Like, yeah, it was bad. A lot of people died, but then you see these accounts that people were writing down, and it was like, on a personal level, it really kind of struck me.
Yeah.
And I think,
yeah, and
while
and I
this
think that's
pandemic is not even close to it's not even close to the
numbers.
Black Death or the 1918 numbers wise, but yet there's still these personal accounts that people are dealing with today. And you ended the last episode saying, we're asking people to give up kind of their livelihood, but they don't have they don't know somebody that has it or has been tested for it or has died from it.
Yeah.
And I think it's always important to, while I'm personally, and my family is healthy and we haven't experienced this, there are families out there that are grieving and going through these losses. And that's something I just want to touch on before we went into this next episode.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, I wanted to, again, touch on some of that stuff before we got into this, because, we did get off track. I talked a little bit about the people who don't have incentive to get back to work, and other people do have incentive to get back to work. And also, someone posted this morning, Tom posted this morning, I saw his post, and he basically said,
oh yeah,
we're approaching the same number of deaths that the U.S. Dealt with in World War I, or we've surpassed that in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't people just kind of get on board? And he says, we're soon getting to World War II numbers. And I kind of said, I'm not disagreeing with you. Like, I'm doing the things I think should do: wear a mask, social distance, wash my hands more than once a week. And it's like, but the thing is, it's not as visceral for some people. It's not tangible. Like, now I know more people now than I did a week ago. Well, a week ago, I didn't know anyone who had gotten this. Now I know a handful of people, and they're generally fine. Mm-hmm. But I haven't buried anyone. I haven't been in the hospital with anyone. So it, for someone like me and other people like me, it hasn't become real like World War One or Vietnam was, when you knew people were leaving to go off to war and that some were dying. It's so it's hard for people to change behavior, which is kind of what this whole series is about. If they don't see it, if it's not very real to them. And this is an invisible enemy, and I know that's very cliche, but that's the truth. You know, if China dropped a bomb on San Francisco, it'd be a totally different story.
And I think Jake and I have gone around and around about this in the past, but the difference between is history and art or a science. You know, there's such a tendency to go into the numbers, to your point, Jake, and say, oh, 60% or whatever the death rate was. But we forget that, yeah, you know, it takes some storytelling skills to be able to look at that one individual and look through their mind to see what their experiences are. And I think that's why we're doing the episode that we're doing now today. Yes, we put it a little bit in context and historically and all of that, but what's happening today through the eyes of people. Not that that didn't happen before, but it's going to be an interesting comparison to see what are people going through today versus, you know, previous pandemics.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal, and I think the theme of this episode is we're going to talk about kind of how this pandemic has affected us in different aspects of our life, without, I mean, getting obviously into too much detail about that, but just in general, kind of how has it affected us in our job, or how has it affected us at home, or with schooling, sending our kids, or if you're a teacher and getting ready for the next school year. I think there's a lot of areas that, even though I really only know of, me personally, one person that had it, my wife knows two other people that did, and that's kind of the closest our connection is with it. But even so, it's still affecting our lives as our family, and is affecting other people's lives, you know, indirectly. So even though they may not see it, why do I need to do this, this, and this? There are changes that are happening to us on a national scale. And so that's kind of my goal here, is to look at it that way. So I don't know how you want to start, Eric, but I think maybe just I'll start. I mean, I have a bunch of different things that I was thinking about how my life has changed, but I guess the first one would be my job and how I go about work. And you know, when this all happened, our boss was really great, I think, and he was very much like, obviously, we're going to do what the governor says. And then he was like, he says, if you want to work from home, go work from home. If that's how, and we have a job that luckily you don't have to be in the office really to do your job. But we didn't know that you could do your whole job without ever coming into the office. That was an untested theory for us. And so I was the only one that was like, I want to stay in. I need to be able to come into the office. And my boss was like, yeah, that's fine. But pretty much everyone else, except for a few people, those first few weeks, went home. And they ran the numbers on it and like, can we still do our jobs? Can we still be a productive company without people coming into the office? And the lesson that we learned was, yeah, you can. And so now he's looking at it not only for the interim of this crisis, but will we be able to do this when it's over? You know, there's a lot of moms, there's a lot of dads that work at our company, and the flexibility that they can work
for the business as well, in terms of space.
Well, and that was the thing, is literally right before this happened, we were about to terminate our lease and get ready to move into a new office in August. So it's 5 months ago almost now. And once this happened, that changed everything, because the office we were going to move in was bigger. It had nicer amenities. But now we're like, no, we can stay in this office at least until this crisis is over. And when we do move, we'll probably move into a smaller space than we thought we were going to move into, because we realized you don't need to have everyone show up every day from 8 to 5 or 6 to 3 or whatever it is to be an effective company. Now, granted, our company isn't like a lot of others, and so being virtual or asynchronous is a lot easier for us. But even then, there's been a learning curve. How do you manage the people beneath you if they aren't there physically? But suffice all that to say is that it's radically shifted how our small little company is going to do business, not only now, but past this pandemic. And I think that's one of the biggest first changes that I saw in my life. Even I don't go into the office as much every day, and I work from home every Wednesday. So it's changed how I do work, and it's probably going to continue to change how I do work in the future.
And
I don't know if
and from what I understand,
you guys have had the same.
Because I know a couple of people that you work with or have worked with in the past. I believe that the culture of your company is pretty positive, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And so that
Absolutely.
lends itself to the kind of culture that you build in an organization, then kind of trickles down into trust, in that, while I'm not seeing you over your shoulder every day, that you're still doing the job that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm curious. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
No, I didn't have anything. I was just mumbling.
I'm curious.
Good to know.
I'm curious to see how things go. Now that school's about to start, there's a couple of different scenarios in the family. You mentioned at your company, Jake, that there's a lot of moms, a lot of dads. What about those families where both spouses are working and they're working from home for the first time, and school may or may not be open in the fall? So how are employers going to deal with that? I had a conversation with a kid in our neighborhood. He's a high school kid in our neighborhood just today, coincidentally. And he said that his mom was going to kind of do a split shift at work, because there's like 4 kids in the family and they've got younger kids. Mom's going to go to work from 10 to 2 and then 8 p.m. to midnight. And she's going to get those hours in, and she's going to be working from home. But at the middle, she's going to be teaching the kids who are going to be doing online learning. And, that's different in every family, but it's going to be interesting 6 months from now, or however long this pandemic lasts, to see, is life really better under those circumstances, especially when both parents are working from home?
Yeah. I think the education question we're kind of leaning into right now is, I think that's in one of our future episodes, in terms of what does that look like in the future. Because those are some really good questions and some really good what ifs. I kind of wanted to. We talked about how this was about kind of personal experience and with this whole thing, and I was thinking about what that is in my mind, and there's kind of like this timeline of events that happens for me. Because I had first heard about this virus in January in Wuhan in the Hubei province of China. And, because we'd heard this before, right? We heard this with some of the other viruses that had come out, the swine flu, the avian flu, kind of from the same region of the world. It's on the other side of the world. It's not going to affect us too much. When it does, just wasn't too concerned. But I do know it was kind of in my head. We traveled to the Bay Area end of January. So it was kind of in my mind knowing that area has a lot of travel to and from Asia. But didn't think much of it at all. And then our first staff meeting in February, for those that don't know, I'm an educator, was the first time that we discussed it as a staff and said, we're watching this, we're monitoring this. because there's a couple cases in the U.S. We shut down Europe. I think we shut down travel from China at this point. And so, we're just tracking it. And then February, a couple cases happen. And then our first staff meeting in March, which would have been like the 4th of March. We said we have a plan in place should we shut things down. That next weekend was the first place I know that was shut down was Fremont, Nebraska. The town of Fremont, Nebraska shut itself down on March 8th. And that was due primarily to they had a YMCA potluck, and 500 people were in that building, and one person tested positive. So they shut down the whole town, public schools, Catholic school, Lutheran school, for a week, and then there was spring break. And so they were going to be shut down for 2 weeks. We have a former student who's there in Fremont. The three of us do. Well, not you, Cameron.
Oh.
Tara's out there. So they shut that down.
Awesome.
And then the following week we had conferences on the Thursday and Friday. There were half days. And Wednesday, the 11th, was the night that the NBA postponed the Utah Jazz game, and then later that night suspended the season. We had just finished up our basketball season on Tuesday, March 10th. And so Thursday and Friday we're in parent-teacher conferences, the second half of the day, fielding these questions. We said, we have a plan if it comes to... And so it was Sunday night, the 16th, that the teachers all got a text that basically said, emergency meeting at 8 a.m., school is canceled tomorrow and for the week. We'll have emergency staff meeting at 8 a.m. and we'll hammer out our plans. And so we went into that mode. Thankfully, our administrator, has provided childcare a lot of these circumstances for us. So, we were able to bring our kids to school, and there was people there to watch them. And then we worked Monday and Tuesday to figure this out, so that Wednesday we could distribute materials, and Thursday we could actually start the distance learning program that, in our mind, at that point was going to last 2 weeks. We were prepared for 2 weeks, and then we would go from there.
How did that line up with spring break for you, Eric?
Our spring break is tied to Easter. So our spring break was like the second week of April. So we knew that we were going to do, I think this was March 16th, we were going to do 3 weeks of distance learning, do spring break, and then depending, we'd come back from spring break if possible. Yeah. So we were like, we're going to prepare for 2.5 weeks of instruction, because the first 3 days of that first week, we just said, there's no school these days. We are doing our prep work. So it was obviously strange for everyone, kind of exhilarating.
And then 2 weeks became a month, and then a month became
But I'll
the
say
rest
that
of the
that
year.
week, those first 2 days of planning were kind of, when I say exhilarating, I mean it was like when you're thrown into the fire of a crisis, and there's people that kind of panic and worry, and I found that I was just sitting there trying to find, well, what's the opportunity here? What are the things that we're going to change? That I'm sitting there looking, I'm like, well, now I'm forced to use tools that maybe I didn't want to, because it was, with people in the classroom, I didn't need to. So it forced me to really start looking at some other instructional methods, and kind of just embracing that opportunity. So when I say exhilarating, I mean it was like kind of a rush in terms of you're going to cram a bunch of new information and try to figure out how to do your best to solve this problem. And that was, aside from the context, was kind of fun.
How do you feel about that now? You still exhilarated, or are you?
I mean, well, now, as we are planning to go back, and we are planning to go back in person, live on campus, with a lot of measures in place. And they're measures that make me
Mm-hmm.
frustrated because I don't want to leave my classroom to go teach. I want students coming to me because it's my space. You've all taught, so you know the power of having a space that's your own. When students walk into your space,
it's your domain,
and they just kind of they whether you have strong classroom management or not, they know it when they walk through the door. So now it's different, and I'm like I said, I'm not excited about that, but I'd rather do that than do distance learning again. I mean, we're a month out from starting, so I'm starting to look at how I'm going to teach, knowing that I can't do a lot of group work, can't have students over the same surfaces. So diplomacy, right? I love teaching with diplomacy. Well, how am I going to get 3 kids to sit close to each other and whisper to each other and then go whisper to other groups without being an issue, right? So I have to rethink how do I teach that type of game in a different format that doesn't have kids in groups, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot of the activities that I like to do that require kind of cooperative hands-on work that they're not going to be possible in their current format. So maybe not exhilarating at this point. I'm a little bit stressed out, but I'm also just taking a look at everything that I do and how I'm going to transfer it into a form that, should we need to shut down, can quickly be transferred to a digital form or is already in the digital form. And the only difference is where the students and the teacher are in space. So
yeah, and I think it's cool, Eric, obviously I'm an ex-teacher and love listening into this stuff, but I'm always impressed by the outlook.
Teacher on hiatus.
That's right. Just a matter of time before I get back in the game.
Exactly.
No,
you too, Jake.
It's
what was that?
It's fascinating to me to see that that mindset, because so many teachers are there. Unfortunately, we all know bad teachers, we all know bad doctors, bad whatever, that are on autopilot and they're unwilling to change and make that adjustment or whatever. But that's kind of your default anyway. I think, pandemic or not, is to say, how can I tweak this? How can I make this better? And adjust to the times of teaching. And that's really a huge part of just teaching in general. But some teachers do that better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I think that you hit on right there is that it'll force people to change. And I think, Eric, you're always, when I taught with you, and obviously when we all 3 of us taught together, one of the things that's your strength is that you were always pushing the envelope, like for the next best thing or the next great thing.
I always felt like I was the top
and saying,
gun
how can
teacher.
we do this better?
Like I was Maverick, maybe Iceman.
Wait, this isn't in the script that we talked about.
So,
I think we need to divert.
I derailed.
One of your strengths is your ability to push the envelope. One of your weaknesses is you can't just take a compliment.
I can't. I hate that. I hate taking compliments.
Or the compliment that we give you isn't good enough is basically what happens. So anyway, that's one of the things that when this first started happening and you were telling me about how you were adjusting, and I said that, I go, well, that's one of the things that you've always been good at, is the ability to say, how can we do what we're doing better? We don't just do this because that's the way we've always done it. And I think there's going to be a lot of people in every field, in every profession, in every industry that are going to be forced to change how they do things. And I think it's going to be on a permanent basis, and they're going to struggle with that. But then there's other people like yourself that have already been looking to change and see, how can I do this? How can I take this thing that I want to accomplish and do it better? And those people, I think, are really going to thrive. And I think that's one of the exciting opportunities that exists in a crisis like this, where it's totally upending how we do things. And we'll get into those specifics more in a later episode. But I think you are uniquely suited with how you have always approached your job and how you've always approached teaching specifically, in that it's never just been well, I found one thing that works for me, so I'm just going to do that for the next 30 years. You've never been like that. And I think this is just another opportunity that's forcing a lot of people, and yourself. You said, I'd rather still teach in person than distance learning, but it's still forcing you to be creative, and you've always been good at being creative with how you deliver content and how you get the students to take that and use it, which I think has been a really good skill.
I want to do the water balloon war for 30 years, though. That's the problem.
Well, I mean, there's some things you just keep because they're awesome.
So
it's not
water balloon war, probably not pandemic safe.
No, you're sending literal virus bombs across from one group of students to another.
How many kids touched this balloon before I launched it? All of them. All of them touched it.
Right.
All of them. Every single one.
There's a certain amount of slobber on it, and boogers from tying it and everything.
How about you, Cameron?
Yeah.
You've had some, with your job or at home. I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot of different changes that you've adapted to.
For sure. So, they're good and bad, highs and lows, blessings and difficulties. I have really kind of to Eric's point, and good lead into what I was about to say, but I've always said there's two types of thinkers in the world: what is thinkers and what if thinkers. Eric tends to be a what if thinker. I have tried to force myself into being a more what if thinker. And I've done that, or been forced to do that, because of kind of financially. Our line of work that I'm in has really been heavily hit by COVID. So I essentially have not had a steady paycheck really since the beginning of the pandemic. So it's been a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and kind of figuring things out and improvising. At the very beginning of the pandemic, I was one of the people at our center that got more hours than others. And it's just kind of the nature of the beast given my role. Now at this point, I'm getting fewer hours than other people. And, being able to plan for that and plan for, all the financial ramifications of that has been very, very difficult. I have the advantage of having a wife who's a stay-at-home mom. So that's been tremendously helpful. We haven't had to juggle childcare and try to figure that out. My wife has a business on the side that she's gotten very, very creative with and been able to raise a little bit of money. But yeah, it's been difficult. You guys always tease me all the time because I'm the most frugal person that I know. I tend to be very, very conservative with my money, and just our family we do a good job of saving, and thank goodness that that's the case, because had we not had some money put away, it would have been much, much, much more stressful during this time than maybe it could have been. So all told, I think it's been a really positive thing in a lot of ways, because I haven't seen my wife, I haven't seen my kids this much really ever since we've been married. And I remember, and this pandemic kind of hit in waves, and everybody was scrambling, and okay, what do we do from a business perspective, and do we shut down or do we not shut down, or if so, to what extent? I remember when I got some directive from leadership that, oh yeah, we need to kind of sit on this for another couple weeks. And I let my wife and my kids know. The kids were literally cheering, jumping up and down, screaming, "Daddy's going to be home more," because I didn't have any work for 2 weeks. So it was cool to see things from their eyes, because as hard as this is, and I haven't been hit personally by it from a health perspective, and nobody really that I know. But you look at it from kids' perspectives, and that's a good reminder of, hey, we're going to be okay. And it's been really cool to see how much time I've gotten to spend with my kids.
And that's something I've noticed, I guess, as a family. Even though I still go into work, I go into work 4 days a week. I come home earlier now because there's nobody at work to distract me.
Yeah.
So I can get more accomplished in less hours.
Yeah.
And go home earlier. And so I get to see my kids more in the afternoon and the evening. And then on Wednesdays, I work from home. And so, I'll get done with the meeting, or I'll work for a couple hours and I'll go downstairs for a bit, and then I'll go back up and work some more. And so it's really changed my outlook on my, home work-life balance in a good way. I think it really has helped me. And I understand there's tens of millions of Americans that have jobs that, regardless of this pandemic, it's not going to allow them to do that. However, it has helped me kind of refocus my priorities with my family and my time with my kids and my wife. And this podcast is a direct result of that.
It is
that I had all this.
Really?
Yeah. I had all this
I
time.
was planning to do this anyway.
Well, I was sitting at home and I'm like, I started to write more, and and just
I've noticed since I've had to start
created
editing
that
this podcast, I
Instagram
have less time
page.
with my family.
yeah, you really need to get that to Nick. It's his job. But the podcast started as I created that Instagram page and the Twitter account for History by Jake, and started just posting history stuff. And then you, Eric, messaged me like, should we do a podcast? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And like, this is the time where I had the time to say, this is something I've always wanted to do. And
We tried in college.
if not now, when? Yeah, we tried something in college.
Yeah.
Your lovely wife literally called. We were on the college radio station because all you had to do is ask, basically, to get on college
Sign up
radio.
on a piece of
And
paper.
we said, all right, we'll do it. And fill out a piece of paper that said, we're not going to, swear and fart on air. I don't know what it was, but and we were doing it. And we literally got called by his lovely wife, and she said, please stop. On air. She called us on air and said, please stop.
You guys have come a long way.
No, that's
So,
still the message I get most days. Please stop.
But now it's pre-recorded, so she can't do it to us live. That's the difference now.
Should be in the comment
that was
section.
that. So what was I talking about?
Family.
Anyway, this whole podcast started as a result of I had the time to do this, and I said, I thought about this is something I've always kind of wanted to do, and if we don't do it now, when will I do it? And that's a big development on a positive note. Not upending my job or school with my kids or anything like that. It was like, this is giving me an opportunity to do something I've always kind of wanted to do.
The positive on all this, no matter how you're using your time, and everybody does that differently, but you talk about all those things that house projects and pet projects and whatever it is, things that people really haven't had the opportunity to do are getting that opportunity now, and we're never going to get this time back. In some ways, I think some of us will be sad when things are back to quote unquote normal, because there's been a lot of good that has come out of this. And, knowing that many of our listeners are believers, and we're all believers in Christ as well. But, God always gets his way, and God finds a way to kind of weasel into our lives. And we've ignored God too much as a country, as families. And it's just been a great opportunity for, I know, our family to just do a better job of Christian education with our children, and not just allowing the school or just allowing the church to do that. Our family, my wife and I, have been trying to be very intentional about that. And, we did a Seder meal for Passover, for instance. And, we had time to set that up and time to talk about that. And the kids absolutely loved it. It was a cool thing. And now we're going to do that every year.
That's cool.
So yeah, just looking at big picture wise, we're going to look back on this years from now and say, this is going to be a positive thing, I think.
I think so. And I think what you said there really touches on some good stuff, is that it refocused our priorities. It's easy to get distracted by technology, and it's easy to get distracted by things and stuff. But when you can't go out and eat whenever you want, and you can't go to movies, and you can't go to water parks or Disney World, well, I guess you can go to Disney World now again. For some reason they opened up, but when you can't do
Florida
those
man
things,
opens
then you look
up
at
Disney World.
I know, you look at your wife and you look at your kids and like, you want to go outside and play? Like, it's like that. You just find stuff to do. And our kids have been playing. We have just a little inflatable pool, but they're out in that thing almost every day. And we got our daughter enrolled in online Spanish class, and so she's learning Spanish now as something to do during the summer break. And it's just a great way for us to kind of expand our boundaries while we're confined, if that kind of makes sense. I did want to ask, do any of you guys have any concerns about you personally contracting COVID, or your family? I know in the last episode we talked about Eric. I don't know if you said your son was getting a test.
Yeah, still haven't heard
and
that.
You hadn't had the results yet.
No, and so we're on day 7 right now, so I haven't heard. I mean, he's fine. He's been on antibiotics, no fever, nothing since then. So highly doubtful.
No news is good news, right?
Yeah, and he hasn't had any symptoms. So, I'm not worried there. As far as possibly contracting it, I'm the one who tends to go out the most. It's not a lot. But I'm pretty cautious. I've got hand sanitizer in the car. I've got my mask. I watch what I touch. I'm very conscious about that kind of stuff now. I actually have been since early March when we first started talking about it. I started taking more precautions on a daily basis, especially in the classroom. I was like, all right, wash my hands, hand sanitizer. Don't need unnecessary touching of things that could contract this for me. But I'm not particularly concerned. I think one of the things I wanted to touch on from the last episode, we talked about the statistics, and I came across a Facebook post. It was a picture of a post, so it was suspect, but I looked a little bit more into it, and there's some sources for it. And it was like, let's say 1% is a mortality. Well, if everyone in the United States gets this, that's 3 million dead. But what it then talked about is kind of what I failed to mention last time, was all of the other possible health effects that we don't know yet. Things like stroke, increase of heart disease, lung capacity issues, possible cancers down the line, all these different things. So I'd say I'm more concerned about that than I am about dying of COVID. I'd be more concerned about having a lessened lung capacity or a higher chance of stroke or something. But I'm not, at the moment, overly concerned. And even when we go back to school, knowing that we're going to have certain procedures in place, that hand sanitizing as we enter rooms, masks on at all times, I'm not super concerned with contracting this. So,
yeah. How about you, Cameron?
I've been blessed with relatively good health, other than my left knee and my right foot throughout the years. So I don't know. Maybe my head is in the sand, but I don't fear it really at all. I don't really think twice about touching the shopping cart or anything like that. I mean, obviously I'm not putting it to the test, and asking people to cough in my face or something like that. But I don't really think about it much. We've done a pretty good job of isolating our kids from it. To Eric's point, I've done most of the grocery shopping and that kind of thing, but it's really not out of sequestering ourselves from the virus. It's really just hanging out and being together. And usually I'm out at work or out doing stuff, so I'll go on my way home to the grocery store and then come back. So it's just kind of the way that it's worked out more than changing our lives due to the virus and the germs itself.
That's and I guess I tend to agree with it, and I am known for stating how I'm not afraid of any germs, and how no germ is going to ever take me out, and I still generally hold true to that ridiculous notion. However, in our family, my wife has some, she's got some health concerns in that she has a compromised immune system. And so a cold to me is a cold, but a cold to her can be a lot more severe and can last a lot longer. And so that's something where I'm not worried about me getting COVID. And even if I did get it, I wouldn't be afraid that I would have any long-term health effects or, die from it. I am concerned about my wife getting it, and I am concerned about my kids getting it. When all this first started, about a week or so after the governor kind of put the stay-at-home order in place, I was at work, and I was the only one at work that day. And I was on a call, and the call was like 3 hours long. And I was like, man, this is killing me. Like, this is just a terrible call, and I feel like garbage. And then I realized, no, it wasn't the call. I just feel like garbage. I feel sick. My whole body hurts. And I went home. And my wife asked me, she's like, can you go to the store and get milk or something? I'm like, sure. So I put a mask on. I went to the store, and the store is only a block away. And I almost passed out driving to the store because I felt so bad. And then my wife got sick. And then my kids got sick. And I'm like, did I bring COVID into this house? And it was a concern. And I felt fine the next day. Like, I felt great. I still stayed home, and I didn't work those next 2 days just to be sure. But I felt fine. My wife, however, she remained sick for a while, and my kids recovered pretty quickly. But I'm like, I think that's when it got serious to me. That's when I'm like, I can't, and not that I was being risky, but I need to be extra precautious, and I need to be extra sure. Because even if I'm okay, that's not an excuse for me to behave irresponsibly and endanger someone else, namely my wife and kids.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, I come into contact with other people. I don't want to put them at risk because of my poor behavior. And so that's when it really kind of hit home that this isn't, and I don't think I had COVID. I honestly don't. But getting sick right when everything is shutting down was enough of a shot across the bow to warn me that, hey man, don't mess around with this just because you think you're tough enough, which is, my normal default response to any sort of sickness.
They could have used you in the 13th century. With that attitude.
You'd have been the one digging graves.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Jake the
Give me a
grave digger.
shovel.
I'll bury those bodies.
Come from a long line of ditch diggers. It's a tradition of our family. But I guess that's, to me, this is an interesting time in that, and I've said this before to other people, I felt like 9/11 was my 9/11, but I think this is my new 9/11. And it's sad that I have to have two of them in less than 20 years. But I think this is one of those things where I'm going to go back and say, yeah, I remember when the world shut down, and That's a generational thing.
I get the opportunity at work. I meet with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. And one of my absolute favorite things about what I do is I get to hear these stories from people and, how it affects their lives and what are you doing for work? And do you work at home? Or there's so many people that I've talked to, and I got the opportunity to talk to a doctor one day, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And, I don't know many people in the medical profession personally. And I just had the chance to talk to this guy, and he was speculating, and obviously he knew what he was talking about. So it was just cool to pick his brain. And then another day I was talking to a roofer who said that, usually, in Phoenix, we have to work on the schools. So he works for government contracts oftentimes, and he works for the schools. And typically the work that he gets done is during the summer when it's blazing hot. He said, oh, because of the COVID and the quarantine, I can get this work done when it's nice outside. And this was back in April. So he absolutely was loving his life now.
I had a school parent who was talking to her about what her work was. And this is right after we shut down. We were having our materials pickup day. And I asked, or no, it was a couple weeks later, I gave her a phone call. And I asked, I said, so you own your own business, and it's like a flooring tile counter business. Like they do those materials. So I kind of asked her, how was business? She said it's as good as it could ever be, because all the schools are like, well, now we're going to redo our floors, and the home builds are like, well, nobody's moving in, so we can knock out a bunch of these houses and put new counters in now. And it was kind of like an odd thing that certain sectors get this boon during this time because things have shut down, that they can do more work. And to your point, Jake, when you said, kind of our 9/11, our second 9/11, I made that reference multiple times during the week that we shut down. So I was in the middle of teaching a unit on the Great Depression. We were actually teaching the unit on the Roaring '20s, and we were doing stock trading. And I had put up all these. I'd been getting the Wall Street Journal for several weeks and just plastering the Wall Street Journal business page on my walls. And if you followed the stock market in late February and early March, there was no good news on any single day of a Wall Street Journal page. Every arrow was pointing down. We had lost, over those 3 weeks, we lost like 10,000 points in the Dow. So I had been putting this up all over the wall before our classroom stock market crashed. And then everything shut down. And I remember having students pick stuff up, or the parents would pick stuff up, and I was in the room and I would chat with them for a few minutes and kind of making that reference to say, for me, when I was in 8th grade, Timothy McVeigh blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City. I remember that. I remember my senior year of high school, the shootings at Columbine. I remember my junior year of college, 9/11. For my students, 7th graders, this is that first big moment that they'll probably remember very clearly and vividly. And to the point that, 9/11, that day was rough. I mean, Jake, you were in college. I was in college. That was a rough day. That was a rough week. But then it kind of faded in a way. Like the visceral, painful, gut-wrenching feelings kind of faded. But if you're a 7th grader right now, you're still in it. Right? We're still stuck in it at this moment. This is not, 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in September in New York City. This is 5 months everywhere, every day.
Yeah, it's more like the Great Depression than it is 9/11,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Where it was this extended period of
And even
this is life now, and we need to adapt to life now.
yeah,
And so it's interesting that you alluded to the stock market crash.
yeah, because the stock market crash
project
didn't actually.
that you were working on.
I had a great conversation with a student during parent-teacher conferences. Or no, it was on a Zoom call with a student and his parent and his mom. They own a gym in town, and we were still doing the Great Depression at this point. And I was trying to explain to him, like, this is a big deal. Like, people are out of work. And so she chimes in. She's like, yeah, we have this many workers, and we're not going to be able to pay them for 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she kind of talked about the position they were in. She's like, we have this much time that we can pay. After that, we're out of money if we're not bringing anything in. And trying to get him to understand, like, we were just discussing the Great Depression and how it just kind of affected everybody. And the stock market crash didn't even bother most people. It was a year later when the banks closed that it really hurt people. Mm-hmm. So, this shutdown obviously hurt a lot of people. And trying to explain to students, A, you're living through a historical moment, whether you like it or not. But B, we have things we can look back on and say, we've been through things like this before. We'll mm-hmm. be okay, but it's going to be rough. But yeah, it's not a 9/11 moment. It's more of a Great Depression moment. And I don't want to call it a Great Depression. It just, in terms of length of time and the fact that it's just kind of this lasting situation is what makes it similar. Because the stock market's doing great no matter what. So obviously that's tied to reality.
Well, yeah, it's always, you can always rely on the stock market. But I do think, and maybe that's a great way to end this, is because the Great Depression eventually did end. But the America that existed before the Great Depression and the America that existed after the Great Depression are two fundamentally different nations in how they functioned and how the role of government acted and how it became a more active, involved federal government as opposed to the laissez-faire type of governance that had existed in the 20s. And I think...
And can I interject there?
That's going to be...
And not to make light of it. But, Herbert Hoover followed Calvin Coolidge as president. And it was under Herbert Hoover that everything kind of fell apart. And Herbert Hoover ran for his second term. The Republican Party asked informally and then tried to pressure Calvin Coolidge to come back and run and basically primary Herbert Hoover and run against Roosevelt. And
we would get another Calvin Coolidge reference in there. Way to sneak that in there.
Listen, I'm not going to, hey, I'm a what if guy, right? So what if Calvin Coolidge, against his better judgment, runs, and he's then president in 1933 instead of FDR, and takes a fundamentally different approach.
You don't have the New Deal.
Yeah,
you don't have the New Deal.
No New Deal.
And
just Great Depression.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of Social Security. That's the theory.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the idea behind it, is that depressions and recessions come and go, but you don't want to interfere with it because it can extend them, which is what people said happened with. But now we're
but Calvin Coolidge died. Died just a couple years. He wouldn't have lasted through his entire term then. But it's interesting because when you say fundamentally different before and after the Great Depression. I always like to say that the office of the executive isn't as powerful as we think it is. We pretend it's more powerful than it is. It's a lot more powerful than it used to be, but even so, a certain person in that office at a certain time can have drastic impact and consequences on the decisions and direction of a nation in a crisis.
Yeah. And I think the decisions that get made in the next 12 to 18 months in dealing with COVID and how we respond to it as a nation at all levels of government is going to define America, much like the decisions made by FDR in the 30s. And it's going to define America for the next, not just generation, but generations down the road. And so I think that's a great lead into what we're going to talk about next, because then we're getting into specifics like, well, how do we think education is going to be different, or how do we think the economy is going to be different, or the role of government, or a number of things, and or craft beer companies that, you know, they're doing the Lord's work there, so we don't want to lose them.
No, they'll be fine.
And I think that's the really exciting part about this topic for me. Is the what ifs, and how will things be different at the end of 2021 or beginning of 2022, looking that far ahead.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps up this episode of Dad Bod History Pandemic to Progress.
Did anyone start drinking more?
Oh, yeah, I took my wife's notes. I'm a good husband. I listen. When she says drink more, I go, yes, ma'am.
And I kind of stuck to one thing. It was Jameson and ginger ale.
Well, it's just been the one thing. It's just a lot more of it.
What are you drinking?
It's just Jack and Coke. I mean, it's just...
Hey, Old Faithful.
I'm just... And I've got the Pabst Blue Ribbon because I'm on a budget right now.
Budget beer.
Hey. They won a blue ribbon 130 years ago. So that's something.
Good enough for them. It's good enough for me.
Is that the only color the ribbons came in that year?
Look, color was tough back then, okay?
They still had dyes.
Anyway.
All right.
Well, okay. Now we're getting off the rails here. Anyway, that's the end of this episode of Pandemic to Progress. We'll definitely make sure we talk about how beer has progressed and how much better it's going to be at the end of this pandemic. But please subscribe, follow us on all our various platforms. And we look forward
share with
to
your friends
seeing you next
too,
time.
And enemies.
Dad Bod History.
And cut.